It started as a low rumble beneath my dreams. I jolted awake, heart pounding. The floor beneath my bed trembled. My eyes darted to the window outside. A yellow bulldozer crashed through my garden fence, tearing up the begonias I'd planted last month. Another dozer followed, its treads chewing through the soft lawn like it was paper. I blinked hard, thinking it must be some surreal nightmare. But the roar of diesel engines didn't stop. I stumbled out of bed and rushed onto the porch, barefoot and in my pajamas. "Hey!" I shouted over the chaos. "Stop. What are you doing?" "On my property?" The workers, in hard hats and neon vests, barely acknowledged me. One of them pointed to a section of land near the eastern shore and signaled a backhoe to start digging. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. "There are bulldozers tearing up my island," I said breathlessly. "Sir," the officer replied. Calmly, "We've already received a call from the Pinehurst Point HOA. They have permits for scheduled work today." "Permits? This is my land. I bought this island 6 months ago." "I'm sorry, sir, but according to their report, it's authorized community work." I stood frozen on the porch, phone in hand, as another piece of equipment slammed into my trellis. Pieces of flowering vines flew into the air. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was an invasion. I threw on jeans and a shirt and marched across the destroyed lawn toward the nearest person in charge. Near a sleek black SUV stood a woman in an expensive navy suit, clipboard in hand, tapping her pen like she was inspecting livestock. She looked up with cool detachment. "Mr. Reynolds, I presume?" "Yes. Who the hell are you, and why is heavy?" "Machinery gutting my front yard? Judith Palmer, president of the Pinehurst Point Homeowners Association." Her tone was polite but clipped, as if I had interrupted a perfectly scheduled appointment. "This is my private island," I snapped. "Not common space. I want your crews off my land now." Judith smiled thinly. "We've approved installation of 172 solar panels on the eastern shore for the community's benefit." My jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." "You have no right. Actually, we do." She reached into her designer bag and pulled out a printed document. Section 8, paragraph 12 of the covenant you signed upon purchase clearly states, "The association reserves access rights to waterfront properties for community improvements deemed necessary for environmental or energy benefit." I stared at the fine print. My liar had assured me everything was standard boilerplate. I had skimmed through it quickly during closing, but there it was, in legal black and white. Judith's eyes sparkled with satisfaction. "If you'd like a copy, stop by the HOA office. But the work will proceed regardless." Behind her, a bulldozer rammed into my gazebo, the one where I drank coffee every morning. Watching the sun rise over the lake by sunset, the island resembled a construction site. Steel markers dotted the lawn. Workers had set up floodlights and temporary fencing. The lake's breeze now carried the scent of diesel and wet concrete. My lawyer, Simon, called that evening. "They're claiming your signature on the amended covenant gives them a right to install the panels," he said grimly. "But I reviewed your closing documents. That clause looks tampered with." My heart skipped. "Tampered?" "I need to pull the original version filed with the county," Simon continued. "If there's a difference, we have grounds for a challenge. You better hurry. They've already started tearing up the eastern bank." The line went quiet for a second. "Don't sign anything else. Don't agree to anything. We'll handle this legally." After we hung up, I stood on the splintered deck and looked out at the floodlights blazing across my once peaceful property. From across the water, my lake neighbor Eleanor Wallace's boat glided gently toward my dock. She stepped out slowly, gripping the rail. She was in her 70s, silver-haired, elegant, and sharp-eyed. "I came as soon as I heard," she said gently. They're turning my island into an energy farm. I muttered. She looked around, lips pursed. It's not right. This island's always been private property, and Judith Palmer, she changed a lot of things after becoming HOA president 3 years ago. I turned to face her. Do you think they can get away with this? Eleanor hesitated. She promised the solar project. During her election, everyone assumed it would be on the community center roof. But your island has the best sun exposure. My mind reeled. Judith tried to buy this island last year, she added quietly. The previous owners said no. Looks like she found another way. The next morning, I took my boat across the lake to the Pinehurst Point Community Center. Inside, about 40 residents filled the chairs, most clutching notebooks or coffee cups. Judith stood at the podium, every hair perfectly in place. The solar initiative will reduce everyone's monthly electric bills by 35%, she announced proudly. And it qualifies us for the state's green community tax benefits. A man raised his hand. I thought the panels were going on the community center, Judith responded smoothly. The engineering survey found the roof can't support the load. Mr. Reynolds' island receives 40% more sunlight year-round. It's the optimal solution. I stood from the back. And did anyone bother telling me? Or showing me this so-called survey? Every head turned. The room fell into a hush. Judith's jaw tightened. Mr. Reynolds, please wait to be recognized. A tall blonde woman in oversized sunglasses stood beside her. Point of order, she said with saccharine authority. New homeowners should take time to understand how things work here. She turned to me, her smile more venom than warmth. I'm Karen Matthews, HOA Vice President. You'll come to appreciate our community-first approach. Community first? I echoed. You mean steamrolling private property rights for some kickback from the state? Karen's smile didn't waver. The covenant gives the association rights. Perhaps you should have read it more carefully. Judith waved a hand. This meeting is about the budget, not relitigating already approved projects. Security, she added. Please escort Mr. Reynolds out if he refuses to follow meeting protocol. A large man in a polo shirt stood and began walking toward me. I stepped back quietly, scanning the faces of the audience. Most avoided my eyes, but I saw Eleanor in the corner watching. And I saw sympathy that they were afraid. And that told me something important. Judith ruled through fear, not support. Back on my island, the first row of concrete slabs had already been poured. Crews marked out rows where the solar panels would be installed, stretching nearly to the waterline. That evening, Simon called again. The county records show something strange, he said. The original covenant doesn't include the access clause, so it was added? Yes, but here's the kicker. There's no record of it being approved by 75% of homeowners, which is legally required for amendments. A slow fire ignited in my chest. They filed it anyway, Simon continued. Backdated. I suspect they never sent it to the state either, which makes the amendment and this project potentially illegal. I exhaled shakily. What do we do? Get ready, he said. Because if they forge this, we're not just dealing with HOA overreach. We're talking fraud. Sleep was no longer an option. Every night, floodlights from the construction site pierced through my windows, casting shadows on the walls like ghosts. The roar of generators never ceased. One sleepless night, I wandered into the attic, looking. For anything. Distraction, answers, escape. I opened a dusty box I hadn't touched since I moved in my grandfather's belongings. He had left me this island in spirit, if not in deed. Beneath a stack of books and faded photographs, I found a leather-bound journal. His handwriting was neat, precise, deeply familiar. My grandfather had been a botanist, a brilliant one. This journal wasn't just filled with musings. It was a trove of research on native and hybrid tree species, with notes on growth patterns, soil compatibility, and sun exposure. Then I saw it, greater than hybrid poplars plus empress trees, rapid growth, up to 10 to 12 feet per year, ideal for natural wind and sun barriers along lakeside properties. I stared at the page as the idea blossomed in my mind like a seed finally finding soil. If I couldn't stop them legally yet, maybe I could. Block them. Not with courts. With trees. I took the journal to Eleanor the next morning. Her garden, as always, was immaculate cascades of wisteria, rows of lily, a white arbor crowned in honeysuckle. The contrast between her home and my war zone couldn't have been sharper. She poured us tea and read the journal pages silently. Then she looked up, eyes twinkling. Your grandfather knew what he was doing, and so do you. You think it'll work? Eleanor stood, beckoning me to follow her through the back gate and into a greenhouse behind her cottage. The air was warm and filled with rich, earthy scent. These, she said proudly, pointing to rows of potted saplings, are my babies. Hybrid poplars, empress trees. I've been growing them for years, with a few tweaks to your grandfather's fertilizer formula. My eyes widened. You have these, ready to plant? 200 seedlings, all healthy, all eager for sunlight. She paused. I'll help you plant them, but it has to be done quietly. If Judith finds out... She send bulldozers. After them too, I muttered. Eleanor nodded. Then we plant at night. I withdrew nearly everything from my savings account. 200 saplings, soil supplements, mulch, and custom irrigation timers weren't cheap, but this was war, and wars had costs. That night, under a crescent moon, Eleanor and I ferried the trees across the lake in silence. My small boat made trip after trip. By midnight, we had staged every sapling behind the tall hedges on the western side of the island. We wore gloves, headlamps, worked in silence, only the sounds of shovels and our breathing filling the cool air. By 1:30 a.m., we had planted 30 trees, each one carefully placed to follow the tints to follow the trees, each one carefully placed under trees, each one carefully placed to follow the TVs to follow the sun's path and block the solar panels from peak exposure. It was then we heard the voice. Out late tonight, aren't we? We froze. A flashlight clicked on. A beam of light hit my face. The security guard hired by the HOA stood at the shoreline. He was young, maybe late 20s, and didn't look thrilled to be working the graveyard shift. Just ... Late night gardening, I said slowly. Cooler after sundown. The beam of light shifted to the rows of saplings behind me. Those don't look like shrubs, he said. Privacy trees, I replied. He lowered the flashlight and scratched his head. Ms. Palmer said to report any unusual activity near the panels. My heart dropped. I waited for the radio click, the alert, the barking voice from Judith. But he didn't move. I don't check this side again until 2 a.m., he said flatly. What you do before then... is your business. Then he turned and walked away. We planted furiously for the next 30 minutes. By the time the first sliver of dawn touched the horizon, every one of the 200 trees stood upright in carefully measured rows. I had planted a forest of defiance. The next afternoon, as I tried to catch up on work from my ruined porch, a knock shook my door. Karen Matthews in wedge heels, a power suit, and those ever-present oversized sunglasses indoors or out. These trees are a violation, she snapped, without preamble. Remove them immediately. On what grounds? I asked calmly. They obstruct a community energy initiative. I shook my head. They're privacy trees. Decorative. Legal. On my private land. Karen bristled. Ms. Palmer will be contacting the county. Perfect, I said. So will I? That night, I filed a formal appeal with the county zoning board. Simon submitted documentation showing the installation's building code violations, proximity to the lake, lack of setback space, and improper foundation materials, but I wasn't done. I also contacted the State Department of Environmental Protection. There were endangered shoreline grasses along the east bank, and I had photos from before the bulldozers arrived. By week's end, state inspectors had emailed me with interest. They requested a site visit, and just like that, I felt momentum shift. It came on a Tuesday. An anonymous email. Subject line: Solar contract. You deserve to know. The message contained scanned documents, invoices, and email exchanges. It was from a former HOA treasurer, one who had resigned quietly 6 months ago. And those documents were gold. A backdated approval document forged by Judith. Invoices showing that the installation company was owned by Judith Palmer's husband. Maintenance contract awarded without competitive bidding to a firm owned by Karen's brother. Simon nearly jumped out of his seat when I showed him. This isn't just shady, it's criminal, he said. Conflict of interest, fraud, and misuse of HOA funds. If we release this, the state attorney will have to respond. But I want to do it right, I told him. Not just press. Not just lawsuits. What then? We take it back to the people. The meeting was standing room only. Pinehurst Point's community center buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread about the solar panels, the trees, the conflict, and something else. That tonight, the gloves would come off. I arrived in a clean, button-down shirt, not to impress but to signal I was no longer the outlier on the fringe. I was here to confront the truth. Judith Palmer stood at the podium, smiling with her usual polished air. Karen Matthews hovered at her side, wearing her signature sunglasses, even indoors. We've heard rumors, accusations, Judith began smoothly, but I want to reaffirm, the solar initiative remains our greatest achievement. Lower bills, tax benefits, environmental progress. I raised my hand. She ignored me. A man from the back of the room, Evan Peterson, a longtime resident, stood instead. I moved that Mr. Reynolds be allowed to speak. Judith's smile flickered. This meeting is for budgetary matters. Eleanor stood up too. Then amend the agenda. Dozens of hands lifted in silent support. Judith couldn't stop it. Stepped forward, my voice steady. In the last 2 months, I've watched this board bulldoze my garden, destroy my gazebo, and install 172 solar panels without my consent. I've been fined, threatened, and dismissed. I opened a folder and held it high. But now I have proof documents showing the solar installation was not only unethical, but illegal, murmurs spread. People leaned forward. I handed the folder to the HOA secretary, making sure it was recorded. In the meeting minutes, Judith Palmer awarded the contract to her husband's company. Karen Matthews' brother runs the maintenance firm. And the covenant they claim gives them rights to my island? It was amended without a vote and backdated. Gasps, whispers. Judith blanched but remained composed. These documents are false, fabricated by someone trying to discredit progress. Then I invite the state attorney to determine that, I replied. I nodded to Eleanor, who raised her hand. I propose a vote of no confidence in the current board. The vote was swift and decisive. Of the 42 homeowners present, 38 voted in favor of immediate board dissolution. 4 abstained. Not a single vote supported Judith or Karen. Judith stood frozen, face stone-like as the reality set in. Karen stared ahead blankly. Sunglasses removed for the first time, her eyes were red. You can't do this, Judith snapped. We're elevated officials. You were, someone called from the back. Now you're just trespassers. Security, once loyal to Judith, stepped forward not to protect her, But to escort her out, Eleanor was appointed interim president by unanimous voice vote. Her first act? Effective immediately, the HOA solar project is suspended pending state investigation. The crowd erupted in applause. I didn't cheer. I simply exhaled for the first time in weeks, without tension sitting on my chest. Within days, crews returned to the island. Only this time, they weren't there to build. They came to remove. State environmental officers had confirmed my claims shoreline. Disruption, failure to comply with wetland protections, and construction too close to the WATERLINE. The installation was deemed non-compliant. Steel beams came down. The humming inverter stations were shut off. The blinding panels, each one a mirror that had stolen my view of the lake, were unscrewed and lifted onto FLATBEDS. One by one. The machines that had desecrated my peace were now cleaning up their mess. I stood on the shoreline with Eleanor and watched it all. "Your trees are growing," she said, smiling. "They're strong," I said quietly. "And so are we." Spring arrived early that year. The empress trees burst with violet blossoms. The hybrid poplars stretched higher every day, their leaves whispering with each lake. Breeze. The solar field was gone. My land was quiet again, alive, but not humming with artificial current. The gazebo I rebuilt with local volunteers overlooked the water. This time, it had deeper footings and a wider roof. I drank my coffee there each morning again, the way I used to. I hosted a small garden party one Sunday afternoon, open to any neighbors brave enough to come. 20 people showed. Several brought seedlings. A few brought apologies. Even Evan from FUM. The back row brought a six-pack and said, "I should have spoken up earlier." I nodded. You did when it mattered. At dusk, Eleanor handed me a bottle of champagne wrapped in newspaper and a ribbon. "It's from Simon," she said. "He wanted to send it himself, but he said you earned the moment more than he did." The label was simple: to peaceful resistance and better roots. 1 year later, the trees had grown so thick you could barely see the lake from the old solar panel site. Birds nested in the empress trees. The soil healed. Wildflowers emerged. No HOA tour didn't ever set foot on my island again. Eleanor was elected president permanently, but more importantly, she passed bylaws to prevent future land overreach. Every homeowner now had the right to veto projects that crossed onto private property. Judith and Karen disappeared from the community. Rumors swirled about investigations, lawsuits, and tax audits. I didn't care. I had reclaimed what they tried to steal, and I had done it not with anger, but with growth. Not with lawsuits alone, but with roots. They bulldozed my garden. They blinded my windows. They claimed my home for the community. So I planted 200 trees. And when the dust settled, it wasn't steel or glass that stood tall. It was the forest I raised to fight them.